The city of Islamabad is almost 50 years old, but it's been the last 5 years of its life which have seen some major visible changes in it. Dr. Isa Daudpota has been a resident of Islamabad for about 18 years now and has some very strong views on what's been going on, and he'll help us put these changes into context and hopefully explain why they've happened. Dr. Isa Daudpota, let's take a look at some of these changes that are coming around in Islamabad. The most obvious one and the most painful one for me is the road network. It's being expanded at the cost, of course, of a lot of greenery, a lot of trees, but it's being hailed as a sign of progress because more people have more cars and, you know, we need to expand the road network. How do you see that?
I think we need to look at the philosophical issues behind this whole issue of expansion. The issues are whether you create development which affects the largest number of people who live here, or for those who can afford a fancy motor car to travel between home and office or for pleasure.
Yeah.
Not only is there no public transport system, there doesn't seem to be a plan to have one. So we are faced with this clustering of cars all over town, and there was a demand for creating better traffic management. We don't have better traffic management, we just have widening of the roads, which will eventually get clogged again as cars increase. So
absolutely. So it doesn't really make sense, especially the kind of time that these projects are taking to get completed. None of them, virtually none of them, have been completed on time.
Yeah.
Not that I know of. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I am more worried about the fact that even when they would be on time, they would actually change the whole character of the place. And today, the municipality is run by generalists, bureaucrats who maybe one day in the income tax department, the next day in food and agriculture, and the third day looking after a city.
Right.
So they are pretty much clueless about how to run a very complex system with all kinds of inputs, a very diverse population, and increasing realization that many of the inputs that the city needs are not going to be available in future.
Right, right. Okay, now let's talk about some of these mega projects that have been mentioned. The general headquarters is moving to Islamabad, a prime chunk of real estate right by the mountains, on a fault line nonetheless, has been allotted to the GHQ. And then there's the Centaurus, of course, which is being hailed as the identity of Pakistan. How do you feel about that?
Both of these are mega projects. Neither of them have had a fully approved environmental impact assessment. Now, these things are going ahead without any input from the public. The Centaurus had a public hearing. The public voiced its opinion, and nothing has happened. The project continues to...
what happened at the public hearing? Were you there?
I was at the public hearing.
Yeah.
There were very serious issues raised about it. The fact that the very scale of the project would transform the city into something which was, which would give the impression that this was meant for only the elite.
Yeah.
This is a project which has a 37-story hotel, a 20-plus story office block, and two large tower blocks, which are for residents, and 5 floors for shopping malls.
If you'll allow me to, you know, sort of...
Let me go back to the GHQ, which we didn't do, right? Yeah. The GHQ is a move from Pindi to Islamabad. The question one might ask is, what's going to happen to the property that the military owned in Pindi when they move here? Even if this
What's the answer to that question?
I think it will not be given to the public.
You think so?
Yes.
Okay. Now, coming back to the Centaurus, Joseph Campbell, a philosopher, a writer, said something very interesting, which is if you look at the tallest buildings of any particular society, they represent what that society considers important. I mean, like there was a time in history when churches or religious monuments used to be the tallest buildings, and then came the castles, and then it moved from religious to political and so on, and now it's commercial. For the Centaurus to be possibly one of the tallest buildings in this city, what does that represent on a philosophical level to you?
Right now, I think it might be the tallest building in Pakistan,
Okay.
as envisaged.
Okay.
The plug for the building given at the public hearing was the following, that General Pervez Musharraf wants to change the skyline of Islamabad. Hence, the constructors, Park Gulf Company, are following the wishes of the president, to which I couldn't resist saying to the public hearing that the aesthetics of a city should not be decided by a graduate of the Kakul Academy. Our goal as citizens of this country and residents of the city is to create an environment which is friendly, which is sustainable. The kind of buildings currently being envisaged, as suggested by Mr. Lashari, who heads the Capital Development Authority, that there would be 100 such buildings on the northern side of the Jinnah Avenue, where the Centaurus is coming up, and that we better get used to it. Now, this is the philosophical dilemma, wherein a bureaucrat gives us the vision, supported by the president of the country, and the citizens have no say in it.
Okay. Now, if I may move this to a sort of larger scope, these changes that we're seeing in Islamabad being the cradle of power, so to speak, of this country, how do you see them as a window into what's happening to this country?
I think what we are seeing is a gloss on the surface, making the country appear healthy, while we have been overtaken by termites inside. I'll explain this.
Okay.
You have, for example, this park which is at the center of the two developments we talked about, the GHQ and the Centaurus.
Right, Fatma Jinnah Park.
Fatma Jinnah Park. Right. But right at the corner of this park, without any public input, the city cut out a corner and gave it away to a junk food outlet of an international company called the McDonald, the big M.
Right.
McDonald today prospers, dishing out unhealthy food.
So what does that represent? This whole dynamic. How do you interpret it on a larger scale?
I think the power structures within the country determine what will bring in money and will benefit the few.
And that's what's happening in Islamabad?
That's what's happening throughout the country, and Islamabad is a good model of it. Now, I used to work on the Constitution Avenue, on which lies the great building, the Supreme Court, and many other important buildings. Next door is the Prime Minister's Secretariat.
Yeah.
The first thing that happened 5 years ago was a massive beautification of that road, which was already in one of the best roads in town. The whole gardening section of the CDA virtually descended on it and made it like a Pakistani bride. And the poorer sections of Islamabad are pretty much unattended.
And is that the way you see the country developing as well?
Yes, that's what's happening. That's what's happening. So the big boom which we see in the stock market is not benefiting the poor. Look at the prices of the pulses.
Commodities, simple, everyday commodities.
50 to 60 rupees a kilo.
Okay, we're running out of time. I'll just ask you to just make a projection very quickly about where you see this whole thing heading.
I think the thing that I'm most concerned about is the major shortage of water we're going to see here.
Yeah.
The sewerage is uncontrolled. We are dumping sewage into our river drains, our rainwater drains. There are financial interests of the powerful lobbies pushing us in the direction of making things bigger, putting on the cosmetics and making it appear until the real disaster strikes.
Wow. I wish we could have ended on a more positive note, but it doesn't seem like that would have been realistic. Dr. Islamabad Daudpota, thank you very much for being here and telling us about these things. And to all of those people who usually complain, and I hear a lot of you complain about Islamabad being a somewhat boring city, well, Dr. Islamabad Daudpota just proved that there's a lot to be